Hey Chris, why is the spare tyre in the tray? Oh, I'll get to that soon because the answer is actually pretty interesting. But for now, part of the answer is that this is GWM's rival to the popular BYD Shark 6 and the incoming Ford Ranger plug-in hybrid. It is the Cannon Alpha plug-in hybrid, and GWM's made some pretty big claims about this thing. GWM says it can tow 3.5 tonnes, it's got a total range of more than 1,000 Ks, and it can tackle proper off-roading. We've been putting plenty of Ks on the clock on this thing to test it out and to find out if GWM's claims that it is the best plug-in hybrid ute in Australia are really true. The Cannon Alpha plug-in comes in two grades, both pretty competitively priced and well equipped for a dual cab ute. Even in the entry level, the Luxe, which starts at $59,990 before on-roads, you get things like synthetic leather, electrically adjustable seats, and a big central multimedia touchscreen. But for $7,000 more at $66,990, you can have the Ultra, which is the one we've got here. Even in the Luxe, you get features like electrically adjustable synthetic leather seats and a big multimedia touchscreen. But we've got the Ultra. That means we get heated and vented leather seats front and back, a big panoramic sunroof, wireless charging also at the front and rear, a split tailgate, but importantly, red brake calipers. The full features list is at the written review at carsguide.com.au, so check that out for more details. The Cannon Alpha plug-in does a pretty convincing job of looking like a tough ute. It's got this sort of snout-forward design at the front that reminds me of Ram 1500s of old, and that broad, sort of wide-shouldered look really works in the market it's trying to reach. As well, the plug-in gets this black trim which kind of differentiates it from the chrome that the rest of the range has, and that's especially noticeable there again at the front with that grille and its surrounds. And if you think the interior of a Chinese ute is going to look cheap, you might need to reconsider that assumption. Oh, but before I get inside, let me tell you about one particular design quirk, the spare tyre in the tray. Now, the story goes that GWM decided that they wanted this ute to have a little bit of a longer electric battery range, which means a slightly bigger battery. What that meant is that the battery started eating into the space that the spare tyre would normally sit under the tray. In China, it doesn't come with a spare, but GWM Australia was like, well, we actually do need a spare, it's Australia. So the only option was to put it in the tray. A little bit of an odd one, but better than not having it at all. The idea is that if you're just around the city and you need all that tray space, you can take the spare out and just use the repair kit. But I reckon it's a little bit of an annoyance for something that might not come in use every day. Onto the interior, and as one passerby said to me the other day, it looks like a bloody Mercedes in there. Now, I think that might be just a little much in truth, but when it comes to the way the interior is fitted out here, it is sort of above par when it comes to dual cab utes. There's thoughtful materials in here, soft touch surfaces, and as I'll get to in a minute, a kind of thoughtful layout. Plus, you've got this little analog clock here, Lexus styles. Nice to watch the arms go round. And that practical layout I'm talking about, what I mean is that there are buttons, basically. Despite having this big touchscreen in the center of the car here, the reliance on it is actually pretty minimal. You've got proper buttons for things like your climate controls, drive modes, some of the things like your sort of diff locks and your 4x4 modes, as well as your settings for the battery. Plus, when you press all of those buttons, they bring up the relevant menu on the screen. And that menu isn't necessarily complicated even when you're not using things like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. It's pretty simple, the layout is nice and easy to see. The buttons are all big, so you don't need to kind of go diving through menus. The driver display is also pretty clear, a little bit customizable, but mostly just shows you all the information you'll need. And as well, there's a head-up display too. You've got a physical traditional gear shifter as well, which is great for a dual cab ute. Plus, the stalks around the wheel are all sort of the traditional ones you would expect as well. You've got your indicator, your wipers, and there's one for the cruise control too. The biggest downside for me is this center storage area right here, because when you lift this up, you might end up accidentally lifting this bit out, which sort of sits covering the main deep bin part. This is where I've got all my fuel receipts, which I'll talk about later, by the way. There's also the cup holders, which are a little bit too far down. Everything's sort of hard to reach, and there's nowhere to sort of lift it up and keep it in some sort of position that you would actually be able to get to things. It's a little bit annoying, so none of it really makes sense together, but you've also got the door cards down to your right as well if you're in the driver's seat. It's a little bit too narrow for a big water bottle, so. Finally, the ergonomics and the seats themselves, everything's pretty within reach. I don't have to lean, the steering wheel's nice to hold, and the seat itself is pretty comfortable. It could probably do with a little bit more under thigh support and better lumbar adjustment, but even over an incredibly long drive, I didn't find myself sort of struggling to sort of fit into the seat comfortably. The second row is where things really pick up compared to rivals because it's really plush and spacious back here. I'm definitely not short on room. I'm sitting here behind my own seating position at 5'11". My feet in front of me, my legs, my knees, in my head and my shoulders, heaps of space around me, and this seat's pretty comfortable. There's also an adjustment for the seat. It's electrically adjustable, which is pretty rare for most back seats, let alone a dual cab ute. They're heated and cooled as well with 3 levels on each of those things. Got a little button down here for the window behind me, which is also electric. There's a couple of USB-A chargers in here as well. And even this little central point has a wireless charging pad, a little storage spot, and cup holders that pop out to stay out of the way. It's all really well thought out. At the back, the tray comes with the convenience of this split tailgate here, which can open up like this, or when you hold down the button a little longer, open properly like a normal tray. It's pretty convenient, and if that tyre wasn't in the back, I'd say this is probably one of the most convenient ways to get into the back of a ute I've seen. But GWM says that its payload is only 685 kilos, which isn't heaps. We've got a proper test for that coming soon because we want to find out if this dual cab struggles with a few hundred kilos on board. That would be about as disingenuous as a motoring journalist wearing steel caps. Here's where things get kind of interesting because that is a turbo-petrol engine. It's a 4-cylinder 2-litre unit and it's joined by an electric motor for total outputs of 300 kilowatts and 750 newton meters, which is pretty impressive. It drives all 4 wheels via a 9-speed auto, but is it any good from the other side of the bonnet? Let's find out. GWM wanted the Cannon Alpha plug-in to be a ute first and foremost that happened to be a plug-in hybrid, rather than being a plug-in hybrid that was also a ute. And to their credit, it does drive like a dual cab ute. It feels its weight from behind the wheel, it doesn't really encourage vigorous driving, and the feedback you get through the steering wheel isn't exactly sharp. But those are all kind of pretty normal traits for a dual cab anyway. It's not all bad. For example, as with a lot of dual cabs, it can be a little bit shaky over particularly rough roads, but this isn't necessarily a loose cannon. It does have multi-link rear suspension as opposed to the leaf spring that some of its siblings do, which means it feels a little bit more tied down at the rear when you don't have a load in it. The change in rear suspension was dictated by the fact that the battery is there, and the battery brings with it other advantages. For example, that 300 kilowatts and 750 newton meters certainly makes overtaking feel like a breeze. In fact, overtaking in a ute hasn't been this easy since the HSV Maloo. Of course, cornering, things like that, trying to drive this thing fast just isn't going to work. Is it perfect? Certainly not, but for something of this size and weight, it does feel pretty well tied down as long as you're responsible when you're behind the wheel. I should note that while it's been in my custody, the Cannon hasn't seen any particularly rough terrain or heavy towing. There's more testing for that coming to CarsGuide soon. But I will say that it does feel pretty sure-footed at decent speeds along pretty loose surfaces, things like gravel roads and the like. So if you're planning on doing any more than that with one of these, stay tuned for the rest. When it comes to how the safety systems operate in the real world, everything's pretty well tuned to work away in the background. The main things you might notice are that occasionally the lane keep will be a little bit too stubborn but gentle about telling you where to be in your lane. You might also notice that the driver alert system is a little bit too keen to tell you to take a break, even if you're just having a look at the screen. The only other thing I really noticed is the occasional overzealous collision warning, which is also something I've noticed in plenty of other makes and models, even from brands that pride themselves on well-tuned safety systems. GWM reckons 1.7 litres per 100 Ks is the official combined consumption figure that you'll get out of this thing, but we all know plug-in hybrids have some pretty fantastical numbers when it comes to things like that on paper. Fortunately, they've also given us 7.9 litres per 100 Ks as the low battery charge rate, which basically means that if you're not using the electric mode most of the time, that's the figure GWM reckons you'll get out of it. I've done a lot of driving in this car and I've done the maths, I've even got the receipts to prove it. While I've had the Cannon, I drove from Melbourne to Orange in New South Wales to visit family and say happy 90th to my grandma. Shout out Helen Thompson. Overall, 1,483 kilometres of driving saw the Cannon return an 11.5 litres per 100k figure tested at the pump. But the trip computer would average about 8.5 to 9 litres over 100 Ks with the battery being used, or as much as 14.5 litres while the battery was charging. That seems pretty fair when the engine has to pull along an entire ute and also charge a battery. But GWM's total range claim of more than 1,000 Ks seems optimistic. Careful driving, a full 75-litre tank of at least 91 RON and a fully charged battery should see it reach as much as 750 Ks though. When it comes to safety, the Cannon Alpha was tested in 2024 by ANCAP and it came with a 5-star rating. It comes with an extensive suite of features, including AEB, lane keep assist, driver monitoring, traffic sign recognition, and sensors all round. It's also got 7 airbags and 2 ISOFIX points with tethers at the rear. There's also a full list of safety features at the written review at carsguide.com.au. GWM offers a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty, 7 years of roadside assist, and 7 years of capped price servicing. The high voltage battery in the Cannon Alpha plug-in scores an extra year of warranty, which means a total of 8. CarsGuide still has some testing to do with the Cannon Alpha plug-in to find out just how it holds up as a proper workhorse. But what I can say is this: there are plenty of people getting around in dual cabs as their family vehicles. And when it comes to the offering that this has in terms of its features and its interior, it's pretty hard to look past, especially for the price. If you need something that is rated to tow 3.5 tonnes but can also drive around in hybrid or EV modes, this thing ticks both of those boxes. I'm not usually one for recommending big heavy vehicles unless you really need them, but if you do need something that can do all of that, the Cannon Alpha is here. Now we just need to see if it's going to hold up against the Ford Ranger plug-in when that thing arrives soon.